AI tools like ChatGPT can sound smart and confident, but sometimes they make things up. These mistakes are called hallucinations, and they're one of the biggest problems in artificial intelligence today. OpenAI's new research explains why this keeps happening, how current testing systems encourage it, and why fixing it is so important in a world where trust in AI is already fragile. 1. The hallucination crisis. When we talk to AI systems, most of us expect them to give us helpful, factual answers. But there's a catch. These models can sometimes produce something completely wrong while sounding absolutely sure of themselves. This phenomenon is known as a hallucination. Imagine asking a question about history, something simple like the year a famous leader was born. The AI responds confidently, providing a detailed explanation. At first glance, it seems correct, but when you double-check, you realize the date is off. The model wasn't trying to lie, it just pieced together information that sounded right, even though it wasn't. Why is this a problem? Because people often trust the confident tone of AI systems. A student might copy an incorrect fact into homework. Someone looking up medical advice could make a decision based on a false statement. And when these errors spread across the internet, they blur the line between truth and fiction. Trust is everything in technology. If we can't trust what a model says, how can we rely on it for work, learning, or decision-making? That's why researchers are worried. Hallucinations aren't rare, they're a recurring challenge. And until we understand why they happen, it's hard to build systems that people can fully rely on. 2. Why models guess. Instead of staying silent, to understand hallucinations, we need to look at how AI is trained. Large language models like ChatGPT are designed to predict the next word in a sentence. They don't actually know facts the way humans do. Instead, they study patterns in massive amounts of text and then generate responses that sound right. Here's an easy way to think about it. Picture yourself sitting in school, taking a multiple choice test. You reach a question you don't know the answer to. If you leave it blank, you automatically score 0 points. But if you take a random guess, there's at least a chance you'll get it right. Over time, those lucky guesses might boost your score. AI models play a similar game. The way we test them today often rewards them for attempting an answer, even if they're wrong. Benchmarks measure accuracy, how often the model's guess matches the correct answer. But they don't punish the model for confidently making things up. This is where OpenAI's frustration comes in. Their latest research points out that the training and evaluation methods themselves encourage a kind of overconfidence. Instead of being rewarded for admitting uncertainty, the models are rewarded for producing answers that look fluent, even when the answer is nonsense. In other words, these models have been trained to act like students who guess on every question, because statistically, that can raise their scores. The problem is obvious. In real life, we don't want a machine that's just good at tests. We want one that knows when it doesn't know and is honest enough to say so. 3. Accuracy versus honesty, a tale of two models. OpenAI tested 2 of their models to highlight this issue. The first was an older version called GPT-4 Mini. The second was a newer, smaller model nicknamed GPT-5 Thinking Mini. Both were given a simple question and answer test. On paper, GPT-4 Mini looked like the winner. It scored 24% accuracy, just slightly higher than the newer model's 22%. But when researchers dug deeper, they discovered something troubling. GPT-4 Mini almost never admitted when it didn't know the answer. Instead, it would confidently guess, even if the guess was wrong. The result? A staggering 75% error rate in its responses. GPT-5 Thinking Mini, on the other hand, behaved differently. It was more cautious. Over half the time, 52% of questions, it simply said, "I don't know." That made its raw accuracy score look lower. But here's the twist. When it did give an answer, it was much more likely to be correct. Its error rate dropped to just 26%, a huge improvement over the older model. This contrast reveals an important truth. Sometimes humility is more powerful than confidence. A model that blurts out wrong answers might score well in a test designed to reward guesses, But in the real world, that same behavior can spread misinformation at massive scale. Meanwhile, a model that admits uncertainty may appear less smart at first glance, but it's actually more trustworthy. 4. The fix: rethinking evaluation. So, if the problem comes from how we test these systems, what's the solution? OpenAI suggests we should change the rules of the game. Right now, benchmarks usually give full points for a correct answer and no points for silence. That setup quietly pushes models to guess, because even a wrong guess doesn't really hurt them. OpenAI's idea is simple: make wrong answers count against the model more than silence. In other words, if a system doesn't know something and admits it, that should be treated as a better outcome than confidently inventing a false fact. Think about school exams. Some tests give you partial credit for showing your work, or they even take away points if you guess incorrectly. That discourages random guessing and encourages students to admit what they don't know. Why shouldn't AI be judged the same way? If researchers start rewarding honesty and caution, models will learn that it's okay to say, "I don't know." That small shift could completely change how AI responds to our questions. Instead of pretending to know everything, a model might pause, reflect, and avoid misleading us. It may not sound revolutionary, but sometimes the simplest fixes, like changing the scoring system, can reshape an entire field. And for AI, it could mean fewer hallucinations, fewer false claims, and a lot more trust. 5. Progress and criticism. OpenAI believes they've made progress. In their latest paper, they claim that GPT-5 produces about 46% fewer hallucinations compared to GPT-4. On the surface, that sounds like a major breakthrough. Cutting errors nearly in half is no small feat. But here's where the story gets complicated. Independent researchers are not ready to celebrate just yet. For example, NewsGuard, a company that tracks misinformation, ran its own tests. Their findings showed that even the latest versions of ChatGPT still delivered false information in around 40% of cases. That's a huge number, especially if you're depending on these tools for news, health details, or important decisions. This difference between OpenAI's internal numbers and outside reports has created tension. On one hand, OpenAI wants to show that their technology is improving quickly. On the other, critics argue that we shouldn't lower our guard when so many answers are still misleading. It raises tough questions. How should we measure progress in AI? Is it enough to say a model is better than before? Or do we need to focus on real-world accuracy? For everyday users, what matters isn't whether a model is 22% or 24% accurate on a test. It's whether they can rely on its answers when it counts. This is why the debate over hallucinations isn't just academic. It's about whether AI systems can earn our trust and whether companies will be transparent about their limits. 6. Why facts are hard for AI. To see why hallucinations happen, we need to look at how language models actually learn. At their core, these systems don't study facts the way humans do. They don't have a built-in map of the world or a list of truths. Instead, they're trained to predict the next word in a sentence, again and again, using billions of lines of text from books, articles, and websites. This approach works incredibly well for patterns that follow clear rules. For example, grammar is predictable. If you write, "The cat sat on the model knows mat is a likely next word. Spelling, punctuation, and common phrases are also easy for it to copy. That's why AI writing can look so fluent and polished. But facts are a different story. Real-world information isn't always predictable. OpenAI gives a simple example. Imagine you're trying to guess the birthdays of cats and dogs in a dataset. There's no real pattern to birthdays. They're random. A model can't calculate them. It can only make guesses based on what it has seen before. That's exactly what happens when people ask for specific details, like the title of an academic dissertation or the date of a historical event. If the model hasn't seen that fact in its training data, it will try to piece something together from related patterns. Sometimes it gets lucky. Other times it produces something that sounds right but is totally wrong. Interestingly, smaller models might actually handle this better. If a small model doesn't recognize the answer at all, it's more likely to say, "I don't know." Bigger models, however, often know just enough to sound confident, and that's when they hallucinate the most. So, to wrap it up, AI hallucinations happen when models sound sure but share false information. OpenAI's research shows the issue comes from how we train and test them, rewarding guesses instead of honesty. Even new models like GPT-5 are better, but far from perfect. And as bots flood the internet, it's getting harder to trust what we read online. The real challenge isn't just making AI smarter, it's making it trustworthy. What do you think? Can AI ever truly be reliable? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more insight.